A whole button, do you think? I thought.
We're now live.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Performance Scrutiny Committee. We have a few people joining remotely, I think. We've got some portfolio holder for resources, Gwynam, and Daniel Webb. I can't see anybody else who's...
Afternoon, Chair.
Afternoon. Okay. So I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. We have apologies from Bob Macy and Vince Hunt is substituting. Do we have any more apologies?
Apologies from Alan Mosley for lateness. His new electric car has broken down.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
he's tasked with either sorting it or finding someone else. So that's the current.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you. Anybody else? No.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I certainly can.
I
Yeah.
can't hear you.
You can't hear us?
No.
You talk about
I think it's a few. There's
Hold on a
one
sec.
right,
Can you hear us now, Willem? Can you hear us, Daniel? Daniel replied before, so...
Yeah, no, I can hear you absolutely fine.
Okay. Who else? Ian. Ian, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Right.
Probably got his volume turned off then.
Ben Shade, can you hear us?
Done that.
Can you hear them, Ben?
He's nodding his head.
Great.
Ben's on mute. Yes.
So... Okay, hopefully we'll have it restored by the time we get to you, Willem. Okay, so do we have anybody wishing to declare any disposable interests? No. So minutes from the last meetings, there's two sets to approve from the 14th of September and the 13th of July. There's just a little note in there that these should have been circulated same time as the 14th of September set, but they weren't pulled through correctly, so apologies for that. So is everyone happy with the minutes? Got proposer for the minutes? Joyce? Second, everyone happy? Thank you. There's no public questions and there are no member questions. So moving swiftly on to item number 6, it's the ICT and Digital Green Strategy paper. Now, what we're going to do is, I think, we're going to get a portfolio holder, who's very kindly come in, or stayed in.
Have you
To
got
come and,
a seat for me somewhere?
Yep. I can sit in Alan's place if you like.
I'm a new Alan Mosley.
Yeah. So, Alan. No, just for the record, so we have the portfolio holder, Rob Gittins, who's going to present the green paper.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for having me at your committee. So, the ICT and digital strategy takes note of the advances in technology in recent years that have transformed how organisations in both the private and public sector operate and deliver better services while also reducing their costs. So our priorities fall into sort of three major categories, which is our vision of the digital county. So number one, safeguard and protect, ensure that all data the council holds, the software it operates, and the transactions it enters into are protected as efficiently as possible against continually escalating cyber threats. Number two, digitise and automate. So pursue and promote a digital county in which as many transactions as possible are done through digitally enabled routes, while also accepting that some transactions and individuals will be better served in the normal manner. 3, to enable and develop. To encourage residents and council staff to develop their ability to use technology and to be comfortable in doing so. And this very much feeds into the Shropshire plan. So if I just quickly go through how this would link to the four healthies. So if we start with healthy people, for example, working with the NHS and other partners, digital technology will assist people throughout their lives, remotely monitoring their health, allowing participation in online consultations and enhancing data sharing, and ultimately creating a more personalised medical care. Having a better connected county and a population that understands that is enabled to use digital technology will help people remain healthy for longer, remaining in their own homes. And a couple of good examples of this could be, for example, smart sensors on kettles, your Amazon Alexa devices, that sort of thing, that would also be able to do sort of online consultations with medical professionals, which would also lead to a more personalised care through sharing data. Just moving on to the next healthy, which would be the healthy environment. So Shropshire's natural beauty and strong green credentials give it at the heart in its area. The technology-enabled move to remote working has been a bonus in reducing road use and hence population. The continued move to cloud technologies will reduce energy use by the council by creating a paperless transaction system, which will reduce the impact on the environment. So some examples of this would be, for example, the adoption of cloud technologies to reduce energy use by optimizing the server hardware and infrastructure needed to efficiently reduce a data center footprint. Also reduce travel and pollution through online meetings and providing special sensors. So these sensors, for example, smart sensors in buildings can be used to optimize energy usage, setting heating at an optimum level and turning lights off when not needed. If I just move on to healthy economy, a strong local economy will depend on Shropshire being a well-connected county with digital skilled workers. The council's work in improving connectivity, improving digital skills in the community, providing support to digital startups and working to make the county an attractive place for high-tech businesses will play a strong part in this agenda. And a few examples of this could be, for example, in investigating satellite technologies for hard-to-reach areas. So, for example, Elon Musk's Starlink program, for example, which has been incredibly useful in the conflict in Ukraine, where their main infrastructure has been very, very poorly damaged now by that conflict. Also running cybersecurity events for local businesses, schools and universities. We recently held a meeting for 40 head teachers on improving cyber preparedness. Regards to healthy organisation, ICT and digital technology is essential to any efficient organisation, and the improvements planned in this strategy will take council efficiency to a new level with digital end-to-end services, a more digitally skilled workforce and better use of data. And some great examples of this would be, for example, an autopilot program whereby laptops and hardware could be sent directly from the supplier straight to the end user without the need that kit to come directly into Shirehall. Also, smart lockers will allow customers to collect ICT kits, including loan devices from several remote locations around the county. And if someone breaks a laptop, they can easily let ICT know, drop a laptop off in a smart locker and immediately get a replacement device. So just in summary, technology is continually changing the way people go about their daily lives and how they interact, learn, play and work, offering a new exciting opportunities for the way Shropshire Council connects and interacts with its citizens. This technical process is predicted to continue for years to come, and the ICT and digital strategy will support Shropshire Council in ensuring that both local residents and visitors to the county enjoy the benefits of a digital age, while those in digital poverty are not left behind. There you go. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. I've just got a few points to make actually. I think when you're doing this, there's got to be safeguards in place to protect the most vulnerable. That's absolutely a given. I think the second one is we need to try and get an even better take up of broadband or premises especially. Perhaps village halls or things like that where people can actually go. And the last bit for me is I feel very strongly that committee meetings continue to be held in public because I absolutely believe that's part of the democratic process, and we need to safeguard that that's not eroded.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very important. You know, we are public servants and we need to be seen in the public eye, certainly for all committees.
So, can I come
Yeah,
back
yeah,
on
of course you
some-
can, yeah.
some of those points? Yeah, so we are continually investing in sort of the infrastructure for superfast broadband. Currently, superfast broadband in Shropshire stands at about 98.4%. So, you know, yes, there is still work to do. And there are all sorts of mechanisms we can go down. There is Project Gigabit coming, but that will be something that's run by BD UK, not by the council. So that is something that we want to keep a very close eye on. But we will certainly aspire to make sure hard to reach areas continue to be looked at in regards to better broadband, super fast broadband provision, and even gigabit broadband provision as well. And yes, I quite agree with the chair that meetings should be held remotely where needed, but also it is also important to have a public face as well. Just going back to your first point, sorry, just around people making sure that the digitally, people that, for example, they may not be IT literate, that they can still access the council in the ways that they need to. And I want to make a really big point here. We're not switching off the phone lines. You know, if people, you know, someone needs to phone the council, have a conversation, there will be someone there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Got a couple of questions. I've got three now. David, you wanted to go first, then Vince, then Julie.
Yeah, thanks very much. I welcome this report. I think we should be, you know, we should be investing in the digital access to the council. I think it's very important. But I back up your comments, Chair, about the need to retain a proper access for people who don't use and don't have access to digital facilities. And I think that's really important. And I also feel there's a danger of people who don't have access to digital actually have a second-class service. We must maintain that people who have digital access and people who can't do that have the same level of service. Don't want people to feel who can't access, you know, digitally, that have a second-class service. So I think that's really, really important. And I think looking at the recommendations, I wonder whether it can be amend the recommendations and add something at the end saying, whilst guaranteeing that traditional methods of engaging with the public are retained. So there's an emphasis there that we think that's really important, and I think that would be, you know, useful for cabinet and council to consider.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm first of all very pleased to hear that we've been talking to Elon Musk about using his spaceships. If you want somebody to sit in those conversations, please let me know. I do have a couple of concerns. First of all, just to comment on what the chair said, and I absolutely support access of public to public meetings. It is interesting, though, that I've got 5 parish councils who, during COVID, had a good number of their parishioners attending their meetings on Teams or Zoom, and now they're getting virtually nobody again. So there have been some comments passed that those parish councils actually that they're thinking about trying to find some way of doing a hybrid because they felt public inclusion was better when people didn't leave the comfort of their own homes and have to travel than when they do. So just a comment on that. A hybrid, I think I absolutely support. I think it's a legal requirement for public meetings to be held in public anyway. So, but I would support the perhaps a good strong look at how they could be hybrided so that members of the public who want to listen in can in funny sort of ways we're doing at the moment. I myself use a dish-based broadband. I won't mention the company, but it's one that has been or was working at one stage with Shropshire Council. The level of service that we've had has ranged from not too bad to appalling. And we've not really hit appalling much in the last few months, but there have been days when appalling means you can't get into a meeting, and that could last 2 or 3 days sometimes. So I think there is further work to be done on that. But I guess really my main concern and my question is based around. I mean, it clearly says here that that 98% of the county have access to broadband, and a number of other people use their mobile phones. I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't realise that the mobile phone service in rural North Wales and Shropshire, which is the bit that we're interested in, is frankly appalling. Yeah. And I can sit on a phone call in my home, and I may go from two bars of service down to no bars of service. I've often had conversations with family members as well as with officers that has required the phoning back 2 or 3 times. And I think until we actually get that fixed, and I've been a Shropshire councillor since this authority became a unitary authority, as I know 1 or 2 others in this room have. And we've heard many fine words from lots of, and this is not supposed to be derogatory, but lots of portfolio holders and leaders about how we're going to get this right, and we're working with them. I think Joyce's husband Keith even wrote to all of the chief executives who made fine promises but delivered zip. And I think until they start sharing their masts instead of keeping their technology to themselves, this is going to be an ongoing issue. So I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done in that direction if we're going to put all of our eggs not quite in one basket but not far off. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Julia.
So my first question really is to both the chair and the portfolio holder, which is why are we considering a report that came to us at 3 o'clock yesterday? So we've had less than 24 hours to read this report. Why is that? That's my first question.
Yeah, well, look, the only thing I can do first of all is deeply apologise for that. There has seems to be a bit of an issue with stuff on the admin side of getting this posted out. We do sort of commit to get these things generally posted out within the 5 days notice. That hasn't happened this time. I do apologise for that. I've been given assurances it won't happen again.
And Chair, why are we discussing it if you've not had 5 days notice?
Yep, okay, I think that's a fair point. However, what I will say is this is a green paper. It's about two sides of paper. So it's very, very early stages. It's not a full report. So I think whilst it's regrettable it's late, I thought it was important to bring it to you because it's a green paper strategy.
And for that reason, I'm glad that we are discussing it. But for scrutiny to be meaningful, we need to respect the Constitution. Members need to have the paper in good time. I've had meetings all morning and all afternoon yesterday, and I have got small children. So rather than staying up till midnight to read your paper, when is it that you'd like us to read it, consider it, discuss it with our groups, come forward with meaningful proposals? So my request to the chair, please, is that going forward, we respect the Constitution and we only discuss items that have been sent out with 5 clear days notice, because we've got to start understanding that for members to all engage, we all need to be treated with courtesy and respect, which means having adequate time. However, that said, I welcome the report. I think it's positive. I have a couple of questions. The main question I think we're all raising is the equalities issue. And I was surprised there wasn't a heading about equalities, because most reports do. And the one possible flaw or area that we're all going to worry about is exactly equalities here, about those vulnerable people, those ones that live in the rural areas. Though 98% have access to broadband, you mean that the broadband infrastructure is in place. Your own report says only 70% have taken it up and 57% live in rural areas. So that's the first group of people right there. Then there's the other group of people. And I know several members around this table have received emails from equalities groups raising their concerns about vulnerable people who might not have a bank account because of debt issues, because of fleeing for domestic violence and having to restart with their identities. And those people aren't in a position to make online payments. And the concerns they raise are around card payments only, and particularly around the car parks going cashless. And I welcome Councillor David Vasmer's suggestion that we had something more specific in here, because at the moment the only sort of reassurances I can find are that traditional methods are not precluded as a potential avenue, and that they're wherever practical will be used. And I think this much more reassuring line that all services will retain the option for traditional payments, I think we need it in there to cover off that equalities angle. So I would like a heading in the paper which deals with equalities, otherwise we're going to have to do an equalities assessment. I'd like us today, please, to consider David Vasmer's proposal and perhaps there's some wording that other people feel more comfortable with. And my last little point, it's a tiny one. I don't know very much about IT, but this is one thing I worry about, and that is the cloud. It's brilliant that staff can work from home, and I really appreciate the IT laptops and the training and all the VPNs that staff have been given. As a former officer, I have to tell you, it's excellent. But I do worry about the cloud, because it's not really a cloud, is it? It's a computer in a desert that anyone could blow up. And so all organisations that use cloud technology must have a really secure backup, some system whereby you've got a secondary system. So if somebody blows up our bit of desert, where do we access all that GDPR really important data? And I'm sure there's a really clever answer. So that's a naive question from my side.
If I could come back.
Yeah, and can I just say, Julia, I mean, I'm really glad Rob's here today. This is a green paper, so it's kind of a trial run. And I think certainly in the first instance, pulled out 3 of the main issues, which everyone's agreed on. So actually, in that respect, I think we've done well. But let's Rob answer the question, and then Roger wants to say something.
In regards to sort of, I'll just start with the cloud backup. The council actually has sort of 3 forms of backup now. One, it has got a data centre, which we'll be moving away from. We do have a backup site down in Nuneaton. We also have a facility where the information on the cloud is also backed up to somewhere else on the cloud. What I will do at that point, if it's possible, if I could bring in Ian Sherms to be able just to expand on that a little bit more for me.
Okay, Ian, do you want to come in and say something?
Certainly can. Infrastructure Security Innovation Manager in ICT. Certainly the point is well made. Cloud is just somebody else's computer. That is the cloud services, cloud wash. So whenever you engage with suppliers, software as a service, cloud, part of the procurement route we have to take, we strongly suggest to business areas they look at all the elements as if it was just a normal service they're providing. So if we're using a third-party provider, what are their backup arrangements? What are their disaster recovery arrangements? How are they protecting council's data? Because we have a legal responsibility to do that under data protection. So the digital first strategy kind of builds on our cloud strategy that we have where cloud were appropriate, and all the steps. We did have an audit committee review of our cloud response and management, and that was covered in there. We do take the safety of data in the cloud very, very seriously, and we use whatever technologies are appropriate to maintain that. Does that kind of answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, right. So I've got Roger, and then I've got Joyce.
Thank you, Chairman. first, second Councillor Basmer's proposal, if it needs to be seconded, nobody else done it, but go with that. But can I explore what this actually means, digital first? And I picked up the comment about cashless, and I went into a multi-storey car park in another county on Saturday. Nobody there at all, not one person. And if you wanted to park, you had to download the app onto your smartphone and do it via that. No machines, nothing. And I drove out of it. Digital first, yes, but there is a limit to how far you can go. And I would not, and I'm sorry, but I do not agree with this council becoming a cashless council after April the 1st. I think if we become a cashless council after April the 1st, and I assume that means parking in Shrewsbury, it's going to be very difficult for certain people. If you want to drive people away from Shropshire into areas to the east or the west of us, that's the way to do it. And I pick up all the other comments that are around. Accelerate, go to a digital first, but do it slowly, slowly. We live in a large rural county, and it's been said about mobiles not being very good. There's quite a number of people who do not have smartphones, who are not on the internet. I'm supposed to be going onto fibre December the 23rd, and I've got my fingers crossed that it all goes smoothly, because with Christmas just round the corner, I may be in that desert area for that period of time. But yeah, cashless. Does that mean what I think it means is that Shropshire Council and every facility that it uses will no longer take cash, including parking machines? Because if that's the case, I do not agree. And that surely should be incorporated within this in the future, because if you go into digital, what does it actually mean? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Do you want to answer that, Rob, or do you want to get Ian to answer that?
We are straying into the sort of the finance side of stuff here, so I'll probably ask either James or Ben just to pop in and speak about that. But what I would say, Roger, is as a council, we probably can't afford to go slowly, because we have got a large budget deficit, and we do need to move on with things quickly.
Okay, James, do you want to pick up on that?
Thank you, Chair. I might bring Ben in as well, if that's okay, in a moment. But I think all the points that have been made are absolutely valid and correct in terms of that concern for those individuals that can't access services for whatever reason by the digital first or cashless approach. I think where I would pitch this is that I think most of you that have used our online services one way or another would probably argue that they need more investment, that they need to be improved, that there needs to be a better experience for people than they're currently getting. So I think that what we've done is, well, what we have done is we've tended to focus on the kind of, I don't mean this, I can't think of another way of suggesting this, but effectively the lowest common denominator in terms of accessing the services. That seems to be the way in which we derive and identify the way those services are then produced. So what that means is that the 70, 80, 20% of the population that are accessing our services in other ways actually have quite poor experience. So what we're looking to do is to try and to improve that by making digital first and by making cashless our first choice in terms of where we go, and investing in that area. What that investment will deliver is huge efficiencies to the local authority, which goes back to the portfolio holder's point. And by accelerating that as quickly as we can, that means that offer is greater. The two things we'd expect to happen as part of that: one, we'd expect greater usage, or we expect the experience to be better for the people that are using it, but we'd secondly expect that more people would then want to and be able to access that in that way. So in the same way as Councillor Evans said, more people would then be looking to try and get onto broadband, more people would be looking to upgrade their upgrade wherever they can to enable them to access those services. So that means then that a smaller amount will be accessing services by a non-digital way, and that's where we can try and target that in a different way. So instead of in sort of generalised universal services that fit across that, they'd be more specialised. I absolutely take Councillor Hunt's point around the infrastructure within this. That is something that we have to again invest in and work on. I think there was only about 1,400 premises that couldn't get broadband, but I think the network, the mobile accessibility across the county is very variable, and is something that we've been looking at for quite a period of time. So all in all, what we're looking for here is a digital first approach to try and improve that way forward. And if I can, Chair, just indulge me just 1 second. I'd just like to apologise for the papers coming out late. There's been a number of papers that came out late for Cabinet, and a number of papers that came out to Paul and the Scrutiny Committee. I do apologise for that. There's been a lot going on at the moment, and I do appreciate that people haven't had time to read those. But I'm grateful that you've accepted the paper to be considered at the meeting today.
Can I just going on from what Roger said, nowadays people use prepaid cards quite a lot. You know, people pay prepaid cards when they go on holiday or whatever. I mean, is there a way for the most vulnerable to actually, you know, for us to have some sort of prepaid card so that they can actually use it for the car park or whatever else they want to do with it? Because that seems a way forward. It seems a halfway house, and especially picking up on what Julia said, if they've got, you know, prepaid card, they can use that. Chris.
Quickly, Chair. Just going back to Councillor Hunt's point about mobile phones, which James more or less addressed then. A lot of people would look at this. I know it's only green paper. There's a lot more work to be done on it than the council has obviously got to save money. But people would find it rather astounding that we've got a digital programme like this when the mobile signal in Shropshire is so dreadful. I mean, I've known people where they can't actually pay at car parks because the phone won't do it, even a smartphone. So I mean, it really does need. It's been going on for a long time. The signals in Oswestry and around Ellesmere all that way are dreadful.
On the Smithfield Road, there's a dead bit as well, opposite the theatre.
Before we jump headfirst into this, I suggest that we get other things right.
Foundations first.
Sorry. Let James come back, and then I'll let you ask.
Just very quickly on that, the piece of work around digital county is around, there's 3 or 4 elements to that. One of those elements is around digital first as an approach, but one of those elements is around the infrastructure. So it's looking to see to try and access additional funding for broadband and mobile rollout, greater coverage across the county. Because absolutely right, there's no point having the world's best smart that nobody can actually access. So it's part of it. It's the difficult part of it. But as I say, what we need to do is, if we get to a position where people are, more and more people are desperate to try and get online because actually the services that are being provided that way are working well, that will help in our drive to try and get that coverage increased.
Okay.
Thank you. About 8 years ago, both Peggy and I were on the Scrutiny Committee, and we looked at actually home aids digitalised for people living on their own with dementia, etc. And in depth, and a lot of suggestions were made. I'd like to know where are we at now with that, and where are we going?
Well, I don't think Rob's going to be able to answer
I'm
that
not going to answer
question.
it fully, but I know that there is
A
a
little
piece of
bit.
work going on around the ICS. I think pretty sure. In fact, Ben's shaking his head, so he might be able to expand on that for me. But there is a piece of work, a joint piece of work between the council and the ICS, looking at things like that.
What I'd like to know is, have we actually moved on from? Are we using these technologies? Like if somebody goes through the door, someone's alerted, or all the other things.
I think we are.
There are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we are.
I'm just wondering if we actually did something and whether that's progressed to somewhere now that's really good, or whether we're still floundering a bit.
Yeah, if we could maybe just dream Ben,
Yeah.
because he's nodding away. So.
Sorry, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gittins. Yeah, just to respond to that point, I think a couple of things to bring to the committee's attention. Ian, amongst the many things that he does for Shropshire Council, is also linked in with the NHS, with the ICS, and we do quite a lot of work with them in terms of how do we best use the computing facilities, the digital facilities, and the digital infrastructure that we've got across Shropshire, both in health and social care. In terms of the councillor's question around, are we actually using, excuse me, are we actually using those kind of digital technologies, particularly around social care? I don't know the detail of the work that you're referring to, but I'm guessing from some of the timeline, I think that may have been undertaken a couple of years ago. If it was undertaken a couple of years ago, I'm quite sure that the pandemic probably slowed down some of that progress. But what can very happily confirm for the committee is that this is part of the discussion which is happening at the moment around how do we effectively do more with less, particularly in adult social care, but perhaps in other areas as well. So this is part of our programme of work as we go forward, partly in light of this green paper. How do we promote digital? How do we use digital and the advantages of digital alongside lots of other things, so that we get the best services and the best blend of service delivery we can for our residents? But also within adult social care in particular, what are the advantages that we can gain from doing that? And it is, again, very much to Councillor Gittins' point, some of this does need to be progressed quite quickly now, because that will help us to secure some of the budget savings that we need over the next few years. So there's definitely conversation happening at the moment to build on what we've got and to expand it quite quickly.
Right, thank you. Roger.
I am concerned, Chairman. 2 or 3 times around here, it's been said that we need to accelerate this to make the budget savings. Sorry, the community comes first. If there are vulnerable people who lose their access and can't do it, Shropshire Council is not a council that I would be supporting. We need to take the communities with us and make sure that they can maintain their access and be able to do it. I'm not an accountant. I'm a councillor to represent the people who put me in place as an elected member, and the community needs to be taken into consideration, and not because it's a budgetary saving that the council needs to make. And yet I recognise where we are with the budget, and we do need to make all sorts of savings, and I made comments earlier this morning. I may make some later on this afternoon. But really, we need to make sure that those who need our help can access that help. And that is a problem where if anybody rings in customer services here, people are saying that they ring through, they can't get the answer they want, they give up, whatever, and they come back to the councillor. Councillors are getting overloaded with the problems. We need to be able to satisfy that demand. Digital first, yes, but we'll walk towards it, not run. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'm very conscious that we've had quite a long debate on this. Julia, did you want to say one thing?
Yeah, it was just a different angle, which is I agree completely about worrying about the cashless car parks. I think what we're looking for is some assurances, and I think that we're all agreeing with David's. I support David's proposal that we look at how we can ensure which ones can be retained, even just as a minimum provision until everyone catches up. But there are other areas where we have already become default digital, and I'm thinking of consultations. That when we launch a consultation now, we launch it on our website and we direct people to the website. So at the moment, we've got the residents parking permit scheme consultation happening in Bridgenorth. And residents on the streets affected receive an email, not a letter. And the email directs them to an online consultation. They are invited to a face-to-face meeting in the library over 1.5 days, but of course they might be at work. And so what happens to the residents who live in that street, who don't have an email, who can't contribute online? How is their voice heard in the consultation? How do they even know there was a consultation? So I think that this impacts across lots of different services. I think we have to look at our role and make sure that we are fulfilling that duty. Even if it's for an ever decreasing number of people, it's still a responsibility that falls to us, and consultation is a legal responsibility. So I come back to needing a paragraph around equalities in here and to explore some of those issues, and let's have some mitigation on them, please.
just come back.
Yeah, come back.
There is a there are certain parts of the council that are forward facing. So Shropshire local, for example, libraries are very forward facing. So there are avenues that those people, if they wanted to get advice on how to take part in a consultation, there is a avenue or avenues for them to actually do this. So, but just sort of going off on another point very quickly, Chair. Would it be worth for the next meeting, just as a slight recommendation, that we bring a member from the Connecting Shropshire team along? Because I know there have been a number of conversations around the table about about phone signal, about broadband, about that digital in the infrastructure. So maybe if we bring sort of the Connecting Shropshire team in as well, they can expand on one or two of the comments made, basically.
Okay, thank you. So, what I suggest is, and this is what I said in the first bit, what I suggest we do, we add to the considerations, I think they're called considerations on that green paper page, is that there has to be safeguards in place to protect the most vulnerable, which takes on board what Julie has said. Whether that's via prepaid cards or help at the library, but that bit there. The second bit is that we should promote better take-up of broadband, and also we need to improve the phone coverage. So that follows on, and we can ask Connecting Shropshire to come back next time. And the third bit is that, it's important that committee meetings continue to be held in public, and that the democratic process is not eroded, and I feel very strongly about that. So,
Chair, I just think that third one isn't for us to decide. That's national government that decide about committee meetings being held in public.
Yes, but I agree. The legislation says quite clearly that parish councils and councils have to have all their committee meetings in public. What I'm saying is that there's other meetings perhaps that we have, like I don't know, licensing and audit and all those kind of things, and I think it's important that those are held.
They're also committee meetings, Chair. So it's not within it's not within the scope of this committee. That's a national government decision.
It may well be, but I'm just stating the fact that I think that committee meetings are important, and that should be a consideration in their green paper. So I'm leaving it there. Right. Is everyone happy with that?
Can I just
Yeah.
I'm proposed to change to the recommendation, Chair, the recommendation on the report.
I just proposed a recommendation now.
Yeah, so with the amendment that I proposed.
What?
Do you remember? And it's on the recommendations of 3.1. So I proposed at the end of that sentence, we said, whilst guaranteeing that traditional methods of engaging with the public are retained, because I felt that the report, although there's some mention of using traditional methods, that this recommendation very much emphasised digital only and didn't give priority to traditional means of accessing council services, and that's what I want trying to ensure in this recommendation.
But I think that's covered in the first bit, though, isn't it? That there's safeguards in place.
Yeah.
So it's covered in.
Have a right to vote on the proposal.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was seconded by Councillor Evans.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So all those in favour of David Phasma's proposal?
It's an amendment to your proposal.
Amendment to my proposal.
Yeah.
To have it included in your proposal.
I think it's already included. Okay. Okay, all those again? There we go. Okie dokie. So we'll take that forward. Thank you very much indeed, Rob, for coming. Looking forward. Will you be coming back with Connecting Shropshire?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Good. And you've listened to us all, and I think that's good. And so you'll take all that away and get it wrapped up in your.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, can I just ask that we have voted down the amendment to your proposal, but we've not voted on your
Oh,
proposal
sorry.
yet.
Okay. So
Might be useful.
I'll put my proposal forward again. Do you want to read it out again?
No.
No, okay. I'll propose it.
I'll second.
Right, all those in favour?
Sorry to put you down to.
No, it's all right. Well done, Ben. Right, item number 7, review of charging policy for second homes and empty homes property, green paper. So, Gwyneth, do you want to say anything, Gwyneth, before we start?
Yes, please, if I may, Chair.
Yeah, of course, carry on.
Thank you. It was universally agreed when we had full council last February to actually look at the policy that we have for second homes and empty properties, and here we are with the green paper. As it stands, I have no issues whatsoever on the increases of charges as set out in the report. My only caveat may be that if we are getting that increase in income, we may need to fund the possibility of a further staff resource to ensure that we actually get out on the ground to investigate the properties, etc. The only issue that I would be interested on the committee's debate is around item 7.10, because in the past we've had people who bought properties where the premium is with the property without them knowing, and there is no way through searches or through solicitors but in sometimes that they are aware of our actual policies. Now, what some other councils have actually looked at doing is obviously keeping that in place for developers and people who are looking to make some money, etc. But I would be interested on the committee's view, and I don't know how we'd actually do it, if they were first-time buyers with a local connection, whether we would have any leniency on the policy if the property needed doing up. So I welcome the debate on that one. But other than that, the green paper is as it stands. It has my support, and I welcome the debate. Thank you.
Before I open it up, Gwyneth, when people do searches when they buy a property, they do a search with the council. Could it not form part of the search about what tax band they're on?
I've actually asked that question when we first had the problems coming forward from people within the county. Unfortunately, the only thing that appears on the searches are planning applications. And I've even said could we actually list the premium as a kind of enforcement notice on the property? But I was told by Tracy Dark that there was no way of actually doing this. No way legally that we could actually do it, because I thought it would be a good solution.
Okay.
Because ultimately, if the premium's there, it should determine what the buyer is paying for the property.
Yeah.
But obviously, if it's a first-time buyer in Shropshire who's just buying a 2-bedroom cottage that's been uninhabitable for 20 years, that needs a new roof, central heating, etc., they're not going to be in within 6 weeks.
No, and I think, yeah, okay. Well,
that's the wicked problem.
Yeah, okay, so we can't highlight that.
No.
Like Joyce, you wanted to say?
I very much support what you just said, Willem, about first-time buyers, etc. I think that is a brilliant idea. A couple of years ago, I had someone contact me about a house that had lain empty for about 4 years or longer. They bought the property and then they got stuck with this bill they had no idea they were going to get. However, that person was somebody who wanted to develop the property and rent it out. So, fair's fair. But I think it's very important with first-time buyers and empty properties particularly that we do all we can to help them. So I would like to have a recommendation proposing that, if we can put that in.
Yeah, I think the only thing is, Joyce, there's a bit more to it than that, because how long would you make the exemption for? And also, if you, are you going to extend it to other kinds of properties? Because sometimes people buy a property and they need to replace the bathroom before they move in or stuff like that, and they're not going to get the allowance. So I think there needs to be very strict criteria around how you apply it and for how long, and perhaps a minimum occupancy of the house. So they're not going to buy it and sell it in 12 months' time, maybe a 5-year occupancy or something like that.
If I can just add to that, you know, if somebody dies and it takes a long time to go through the estates and everything else, then you've got a property, this particular property, something has happened, and I don't know what happened with the owner who died, but that property was sitting empty, deteriorating for quite some time. So actually, even though it was a developer that bought it, it was, you know, from the point of view of aesthetics and the area, good that it was bought, but that could have put them off, well, would have put them off if they'd realised how much it cost. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, so I think there's a whole lot of work around this as to how long you give it for, and you know what criteria there is. James,
If I can come in, I might actually, if I could bring Phil Weir in, who knows a lot more about this than I do, but where I'd go with that is that there is not a discretionary policy, but there is an approach whereby people can appeal against this, and there's a process that goes through. So I don't know whether Phil just want to quickly talk about that.
Yeah, so.
do you want to put your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, so we can.
These are new to me. Which one is it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, in relation to the premium, the council can decide to levy it or not. So we can't actually make any exceptions when making that decision. So only the government can make exceptions to the premium being levied. But then what we can do, and what we do is we have further power to award discretionary council tax discount as we see fit, and that is delegated to James in the first instance. So where somebody says it's unfit, you know, similar circumstances to the various members have outlined, we gather their evidence and a paper is presented to James to say this person thinks that it's not fair, whatever, and sometimes a discretionary discount is given, and you know the liability is reduced or removed. Probably more times than not, it isn't. There's a further appeal then if they're unhappy to go to the general appeal panel, which some members I think sit on sometimes. So there is a process for consideration to reduce the premium if it's deemed to be unfair in certain circumstances. Any policy around it would have to go under section 13A discretionary discount as well, and financially the council has to pick up the full cost of that. So any award under section 13A is a general fund, it comes in, so the council have to pay the whole lot. So if you developed a policy, you'd have to recognise that the cost of whatever it is would probably cost more than perhaps not having the premium in the first place potentially. But so there is already a process in place. So if you formalised it, and I know some councils have formalised it, it's quite difficult to administer, because when the government initially were proposing the premium, they did say that they may make an exception for properties on the general market for sale, and a lot of councils responded to say, well, how do we administer that? It's really subjective. It's really difficult because it is a subjective decision to make it an actual policy to apply it. So it is an option, but just so members know, we do have that consideration to provide, you know, where the circumstances are exceptional now anyway. And, you know, it does work, I think.
So what do you want to do, Joyce? Do you want to ask Willem to come up, have a look at it again and come up, talk to you about what you think we ought to?
Yes, I think that'd be very good.
Yeah.
Task and finish group, actually.
Could I just quickly come back in, because I'm thinking on my feet I might have had a solution.
Oh, right, well done.
Obviously, the looking at the criteria of who gets the reduction and who doesn't, we could actually just use the same methodology as we do in granting planning permission for exception sites, local connection, not able to afford another property that's already done, etc., etc. And it would give us a whole way of actually a logical way of giving relief to first-time buyers, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it needs a bit more investigating.
Yeah, just a question. Who made that decision though? Would it be someone in the planning department or someone in finance, or?
It would be down to James eventually.
Okay.
So for my change, just to confirm, as Phil said, the regulations state it's a requirement to you can either apply it or not, and then any discretion against that falls under the role of the 151 officer to local authorities. So however you draw this up, it would still be me making the decision on the matter.
Okay, can I ask another question, Willem? In the paper, you talked about holiday homes and business rate relief. I wonder if you could just explain that to the members of the committee, because that bit was quite interesting.
Okie dokie. It's basically, Chair, it's the difference between somebody has a second home for their own use and doesn't rent it out, and then there are holiday lets. Now, for example, what the government has brought forward is legislation on the business rates as of next year. If you're running a holiday let, you have to ensure that it is available for 140 days of the year. And in future, you will also have to prove that it was actually let to third parties for 70 of those available 140 days of the year. So obviously that's going to take some sort of, looking after. Somebody's going to have to administrate that. But at the same time, I would be hopeful, where in Shropshire we've had an awful lot of flats and apartments with normal tenants turfed out to Airbnbs, and they probably applied for business rates, but maybe not getting the demand. There's going to be a lot more administration for them. So it stands a chance that they may go back into being normal rented properties again. So all in all, it's legislation that's out of our hands, and we can't play with that as far as I'm aware. But it is understanding. It would be good to understand how many houses effectively are paying business rates or registered for business rates, because the other issue is if you only have one holiday let for business rates, it's more than likely it's under the threshold under the business rate valuation, and therefore applies for full business rate relief, like a little shop. And so they don't actually pay anything into the pot unless they've got 2 or 3 properties, and then the business rate value is accrued. And once it gets over a certain level, they will have to pay business rates. So it's a double whammy. But again, without resource, putting it into that to have staff to actually investigate all this, which if we go for the increase in the prices, I think it'd be worth doing, because I think it's one of those situations where the cost of the staff will pay for themselves, if you get my gist.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Quillan. Roger, David, Chris, and Julia. Right, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with charging for second homes, empty homes, anything like this, because I want homes returned available for community use, for residents' use. And I look at 5, and yes, I can go with that. But I can't really understand the different paragraphs. 7.8, when it says that once the decision's made, that's it. And then when it goes to 7.14 and 7.15, which says there is a methodology about an appeal. Do they go together, or are they totally separate? Because 7.8 says once the decision is made by council, that's it. And then if one goes to 7.14 and 7.15, it says there is a methodology that you can appeal the premium charge. And it's understanding those two and the relationship between them, because if we go down with the financial charges there and the implications of it, charging premium rate as appropriate, because the council can do with the money, we need the money, etc., things like that. And it's marrying those 3 paragraphs together. Can that be, I might be dense, I don't know, but can that be opened up and in more information, please?
Yeah, Phil will know the answer to that one, I think.
Yeah, I think the regulations enable the council to apply the premium, but they don't give the council the right to put any exceptions in at that point. But the council has a general power to reduce anybody's council tax, and therefore anybody who's so people can appeal to their council tax reduced or removed in any circumstances. So you can apply that general appeal to people who are aggrieved at having to pay the premium. So it's 2 different things, but they're sort of connected. The general power to reduce anybody's council tax applies to anybody. So when it goes to council, the decision that the council has to make is, do we want to levy the premium or not? And we do. And then the options are what we currently do through our discretionary power, which is delegated to James. As I say, at the moment, we consider people who are aggrieved on an individual basis. And you know, we take that responsibility very seriously. So we make sure that we do get a proper decision through and it's recorded. And as I say, some members will know that it then goes to appeal sometimes. And if they're still unhappy, they can go to evaluation tribunal. So there's a process for individual consideration, or we could develop a policy through the same regulation, because you can have a class of dwellings that you want to do something different on with council tax, but it's the same thing effectively, and effectively, like James said, it will still effectively go to James. So the difficulty of formalising it is it's quite a subjective decision anyway, even if you've got guidelines around it, which I think we probably have developed anyway to a degree through just experience. So I don't know if that makes sense. It's quite difficult.
I think that makes it worse. Right, Roger, you want to come back?
Yeah.
Joyce, do you want? Oh yeah, you're further down the list.
So, as I understand it, then a person could, if they did, as a first-time buyer, will say, buy a house subject to a premium rate, they could do the appeal, and it could be granted by James, and it's up to James or the panel to agree. They could appeal there about having the premium rate reduced. So that would give a method to it, buyer officers to do it, save complicated things, but that is available at present for first-time buyers as an example, to actually utilise and reduce that premium back down to a manageable level, so that if they wanted to do some renovation, it is there, but they'd have to do it via the appeal system to James or the appeal panel. So that system is there, and it was up to the interpretation and satisfaction of the officer doing it, and then the appeal panel. Am I right?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, that's basically right. Yeah. So it's a subjective decision. The advantage is it's a case by case. So as Phil has said, I get a report setting out all the facts based on investigation of it, and then the question for me is this in some way, the policy has been applied inappropriately, or is there a circumstance here that is, it was not foreseen in the way in which the policy was put together? And if as part of that there is a serious consideration, then I would grant that. I'd grant that delegation. If not, then it would be maintained. But the advantage is the case by case consideration, which is what it needs to be, because it's very subjective.
Yeah.
But then if they're unhappy, they still go to the members' general appeal panel anyway. So there's a clear process to let people, and sometimes James will award it, and sometimes James doesn't award it, and the members do award it. So it's that individual consideration at the moment that we've got. But you're absolutely right. That's a first-time buyer who was hit straight away with a premium can appeal and get that consideration.
So I've got David Fassmer, Chris Schofield, and Julia Buckley. Not all of them. No, Joyce Barrow. Sorry, not Julia. Did you want to split? Oh, yeah, right. Okay, sorry. Two JBs. Right. Okay, sorry.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would say I support very much Councillor the proposal that we consider Councillor Butler's proposal, Councillor Barrow. I very much support that. But that my awareness is of a scheme. I was aware of a case that went to appeal, that went through this appeal process you've just been describing. And I think at the end of the day, that was not successful. And the impression I got from just talking to various people, this is some time ago, was that people very often didn't succeed. The likelihood is that they wouldn't succeed. And I wondered whether you had any figures at all about the number of appeals you consider, which ones, how many succeed, how many don't, and how many then go on to further general appeals panel, and how many of those succeed and don't succeed. Because I worry in actual fact that there might be an appeal kind of procedure which you can use, but very often people it's not successful, and I therefore wonder what's the criteria you're using to judge these, because I think these cases do come up, and we want to encourage first-time buyers, and we want to see properties that have been empty for a long time going semi-derelict to be improved. And it seems to me at the moment the council's policies are not allowing that.
And I think the other thing is as well, I mean, James might have some statistics, but I doubt he'll have the statistics of how many of the applicants are first-time buyers. I don't know.
Can I speak to that?
Oh, yeah,
Chair?
go on then,
I'm sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
Having sat on an appeals panel, it does work, and members do vote against officers' recommendations. And I do think it is a fair and robust system. It definitely works. My only concern, I'm going off slightly, is that if you do have first-time buyers, the ones we're trying to help here, how would they know they can appeal it? And how do they know they can? Well, I know they'll get written confirmation if they appeal it and you say no, but it's a scary thing coming before a panel. I've seen people sitting in front of a panel. How do we relate to them?
And I think that's for Gwynn to go away and think about and come back to us. Okay, so I've got Chris Schofield.
My question's been answered.
Right, okay, Julia.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is just about how this relates to the one we had this morning at Cabinet, which came from Gwynn. If I've understood it, and I probably haven't, there's two halves to it. One is about how do we solve the problem of the long-term empty houses, and it's by increasing the premium. And as I understand it, that's what we tried to solve this morning by Cabinet having approval to increase those rates, and they're the same as the ones written in this green paper. But I feel as though that first half was already signed off this morning. Perhaps I've missed something. But the second half, we're talking about second homes and whether and when they should apply under the same rules and whether they're Airbnbs in 140 days. And I would like to make another suggestion, which is that the biggest problem is the long-term empty houses, the ones that have been derelict for 20 years. And what we really want is to see movement on them. We want to see them moving, whether it's people buying them to live in or develop them or sell them to us for social, whatever. We want to see movement. So what about when an empty property is sold, that the new buyer has a 6-month amnesty, whoever they are, they've got 6 months to sort the building out. Because what it does, it incentivises people to sell derelict buildings, it incentivises people to buy empty buildings, and it doesn't penalise them at the point of purchase. What it does is give them 6 months to sort them out. And if they don't do it in 6 months, they will be slapped with these fees. Because I think an exemption rather than appeal incentivises the movement. If we have this, when you buy it, it's your problem, that will disincentivise anybody touching those properties because it's an additional cost on top. If they don't know about it, it's then an unforeseen one. And the idea of appeal, first-time buyers won't do it, some people won't know. There's all lots of different shades of why that will put lots of different types of people off. Actually, we want them moving. And if they can't do it in 6 months, you'll either get the premium or you'll get the actual council tax. So I'd like to look at it a different way if I've understood the different halves of it.
So I was listening to Cabinet this morning, and Willem will correct me if I'm wrong, but and Roger was talking as well. And some of these houses that have been empty a long time have slipped because they're derelict. They don't pay rates anymore.
They don't pay anything.
So if you buy a house that's derelict, you don't pay rates the day you buy it because it won't be habitable. That's right, isn't it?
A handful of them, I think it was.
It's in the valuation list and it's been empty for more than 2 years, it will be getting a premium will be on the property, so that buyer will pick up the premium straight away. The valuation.
No, but what Roger was saying this morning at Cabinet was that this particular one in his case, it's not on your list. So when anybody bought it, they wouldn't be paying anything at all.
Up to 20 years.
20 years.
So that's a handful of derelict.
So I think the answer is possibly for Gwynn to go away and think about all this and perhaps bring it back to us. I don't know, Gwynn, what do you think?
The first question I was going to answer is how do people know about the right to appeal? And we did ask that when the council tax bill goes out, that it is part of that bill, that there is information on the actual bill if they can appeal if there is, a premium on there. I do listen. I do understand Councillor Buckley's way of actually looking at it, and it may or may not have legs. My problem is a lot of developers will probably buy those properties and do them up to sell them on, and we would actually be funding the wrong people and at the same time losing income to the council. So, but it is something we could take back and look at, and perhaps Phil can look at what other councils are actually doing. And again, the other problem is actually policing it. So, that is going to be quite resource heavy. I'll be interested to see what Phil thinks of how easy that would be. Thank you.
All right, come on, Phil.
I don't think it would be that easy. Generally, it's not easy to police. I also think it's a valid point that as soon as you start making some exceptions, then another group of people think it's unfair that that group have got an exception, and if it's 6 months, and then that the group who get the 6 months will say 6 months isn't enough. So wherever you pitch it, you're still also going to sort of have the same problem. It might just be 6 months down the line, because a lot of the people where they do buy it, I mean, I think the example that that initiated this, where we had an appeal in January, they were taking much longer. They were first time buyers trying to get on the property market, and all of those things. 6 months wouldn't have been enough for those people, so they would have probably still appealed. But what I would say in relation to that, they did go through the appeal, but the thing that I think swayed the members against them was when they said, we did know the premium was in place and we did get the property cheap, but we still don't think it's very fair.
Wow, okay.
And so, a lot of people would say they didn't know. We're not shy about it. We advertise it. I think we do tell estate agents, but they're reluctant to pass that on because it might impact on a sale. So I think that's the thing. Wherever you pitch it, you sort of still going to have the same problem, and I think the same request for discretion.
And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. And Gwyneth said you couldn't do it. There must be a way of getting the people who are buying these properties to know that there's a premium on the house. We've got to think of a way, especially Rob's gone now with all his ICT hat on and everything. There's got to be a way that we can tell the people that there's a premium on the house. And maybe we should task you with that, Gwyneth, because I think we'll go around in circles and ever decreasing circles here. So can you think about all the things we've said and perhaps come back to us again? Is that all right?
I will try, but I've been round the Wrekin on this one already, on how we can do it, whether we do it through estate agents, etc. The one thing, just to reiterate, the paper we brought to Cabinet on the draft empty homes policy this morning was actually answering a lot of the questions you were perhaps looking at, because it's not just using the council tax premium to get these houses back to living use. Because we're already charging what we're charging now, as stated in the draft policy. What the green paper is to increase that charge to make it more onerous for the property owners to hold on to empty homes. But the other part of the draft property paper this morning was far more about how the council can physically tackle it and compulsory purchase, etc. So it's looking at other ways of how we can do it. I think, from my point of view, the policy is as good as it can get as it stands, except I really want to increase how much we charge, especially around second homes. And I think what I would like to propose is that we look at the appeal process and perhaps put something in there around first-time buyers having to have the same connotation as if they wanted to build an exception property in Shropshire. So we encourage local people to have that ability to do it locally, and we keep them in the county. That would be my view. So then you've got a format that if they do appeal, they've got local connection, they're approved by the local town or parish council, they work locally, or they're coming back to support parents. It's all those things, the same as we have with affordable section sites. I'd be interested in what the committee would think about if we drafted that into part of the appeal process.
All right. So Joyce, you go back to Joyce because she was on my list. And also Joyce was the first person to speak. What do you think of Gwyneth's proposal?
I would wholeheartedly.
So would you like to
recommendation?
Yeah, you'd like to recommend that.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Roger, before we
I'll second it.
Second it, okay, so that's fine. So you've got a proposal and a seconder. Ashley, you've more or less got.
I would have to take the caveat that I would have to understand the legality of how we can do it.
Yeah,
but
okay.
from the conversation, I'm sure we'd be able to as part of the appeals process.
So hopefully that's going to be unanimous then. If we vote on that, yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Gwyneth.
Thank you, Graham.
But you can't go away. We can't hear him now, he's on mute.
I said that was the easy one.
That's the easy one, okay. So item number 8 is the financial monitoring Q2, which was at Cabinet this morning. Oh, thank you very much, Phil.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Do you want to say something before Ben speaks, or?
Yeah, I'll just say something very briefly. Obviously, we debated this at council this morning. The position, as stated, is due to the ongoing pressures in children's services and adult social care, but more importantly around inflation. I do believe if we hadn't got the inflationary pressures, we would pretty much be at a balanced budget as we are now. So we've got Ben, Jay and James with us, so I'll let them take the floor and answer any direct questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If any of you's got any questions, I mean, I think, and this is something that hopefully we'll deal with in the task and finish group. I think what's coming out loud and clear is actually we need to get our performance data sorted out, and we need to use our performance data in our financial planning. And we're a little bit behind on that, so we need to absolutely get on the front foot with that, because there were questions asked this morning, and if we'd had that information, they would have been answered straight away. Because, to my mind, there aren't enough social workers in the country. We can say that till we're blue in the face, and it's been raised a lot of times, but actually if we had the figures behind that, we could, show everybody that we're no different. In fact, we've got less vacancies than our comparable authorities. So actually, in that respect, we're doing okay. But anyway, I don't want to stifle the debate, but that's certainly an area I should be looking at in the task and finish group. So have we got any more questions? I know you asked quite a few this morning, Roger. Have you got any more you want to ask? Or?
Yeah, all answered, mate.
Yeah. Junior asked a few. I think that's right.
Yeah, it isn't the same question because it's there
It's
anyway.
slightly different.
But
Yeah.
they are a little bit different, and they are more detailed, I suppose.
Right. Okay.
I noticed on page 15 of the report this morning, which is the one I'm referring to, page 5 of this report, I think, it talks about the Shire services, and it concerns me that there was a decision made 18 months ago, I think, about charging schools extra for school meals. I objected to it and asked a number of questions to it, because I thought a number of schools would leave Shire services and we would not sort out the overspend that was listed then. And I see here, Shire services forecast overspend 537,000. That's more than was there before. It's supposed to be a balanced service, and this is due to a reduction in income as a result of a number of clients seeking alternative provision for their school meal service. And there's also a question later on about the from HR, which says that the SLAs that the schools now pay the council has reduced because of the increased cost, and hence the reduction in their not reaching their target. From Shire services, what is going to be the policy for Shire services if the council, and I use the council as though I'm not part of it, goes down the avenue of Shire services being a zero cost to the council? I'm not sure how that is going to be achieved and still deliver services, especially to the smaller schools, which may not be able to go out to outside tender for their meal service. It may not be your cabinet portfolio, Gwilym, but it's part of this financial service, and I have one or two others. But as scrutiny, I think we need to understand what is happening about the Shire services cost.
All right. So Benjay, you said he was picking up the answers. Do you want to answer that one?
Very, very happy to answer, Chair. Thank you. So I think just two issues flagged there, Councillor. So one around Shire services and the other around HR. I think it's important to recognise that, particularly with Shire services, that there's a number of schools outside of the Shropshire area. Some of this, I think, is quite possibly down to pricing, but it's also down to the way in which different academy chains are working, and some of the natural churn within the market. I think it would be difficult to say that it was simply to do with the way that the charging was being enacted that was leading to the loss of business. I think it's important to recognise that wider market context and the fact that many of the academy chains are starting to make different arrangements around some of these things. It is nonetheless a problem, and it's a problem that we recognise. I'm concerned by, and I'm talking to colleagues about exactly how that works through. So I think that would be my response on the Shire Services issue. I think it's something similar on the HR as well. I think we need to be careful that certainly the price point on some of these services is really important. Some of the drop off in the income that's been achieved is again due to the way that academy chains are seeking to find their own cost efficiencies in different ways, but also to do with the way that there was an increase in some of the areas of activity through last year, and some of that was one off, and some of that's now dropped away. I think the point, I understand the councillor's point. I think that the scale of it relating to HR, looking at around about 11,000 there, so it's not huge in that respect. But I think it is something which we are concerned about, and it's something that I think is going to get more difficult as we go into the future, as all councils are trying to generate income in different ways. But we need to try and do that in a way which also safeguards that income. So we don't want to raise some prices too much if that kind of causes a problem. But I think I take on board the councillor's comments, but I'm not sure that is quite the position which I'm seeing in terms of the way it's been represented back to me by those service areas.
Right, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Shire Services did come to this scrutiny committee, and we scrutinised the decision, and it was said there by the representative from Shire Services that they did not bid for any school services meal where there was a pupil of, I think it was below 200, because it was uneconomic. This council recognises the benefit that a good meal does to the young person, and they are extending the free school meals during the school holidays to enable that to happen. But a school of 100 or 50 or 80, how are they going to manage and be able to pay this cost if Shire Services actually tries to get down to a zero cost to the council? It's something that this council may well have to help or pay to help those schools deliver a meal to those, and I'm talking about primary schools essentially, who are small. And that's the policy that was adopted by the Cabinet 18 months ago, I think. I have real worries if that policy is implemented, which is why I'm raising this issue here, because it may not be, it will be a cost, but surely to go down to zero is not practical.
Okay, and that's all your questions, is it?
Well, no, if I can, Chair.
No, you can get the answer to that one.
Well,
can't you?
I stuck my hand up if you want.
Oh, right, okay.
I was a governor over at Woodside Primary School, which is the biggest primary school in Shropshire, approximately 700 pupils. Woodside had the services of 13 years I was there as a governor. Woodside had the services of Shire Services, who prepared meals for, I think it was Latin Holy Trinity and Trevonan, I think it was actually, because they were too small to warrant having staff and kitchens. It would have been too costly for the individual schools themselves. So a bigger school, I might say, at a very small profit, did pick up, and those meals were picked up by Shropshire minibuses and delivered to those schools. So those children in smaller primary schools did have access to hot meals that were being prepared by Shire Services. I know that probably doesn't allay everything you've said, but I think there has traditionally been provision there for smaller primary schools which have worked in conjunction with larger ones who have kitchens to provide those meals. But I absolutely get the point that you were making about children having a good square meal every day.
Thank you, Vince. Right, Benjay, do you want to add to anything that Vince has said? Roger, do you want some more detail on that? Yeah.
No, it's just I am concerned, and I recognise there are kitchens who provide it for other schools. I'm chairman of one school and vice chairman of another school, governors, and both schools have now left Shire Services. So I can talk that decision was made by the government. So, and they've gone out. One of them is now with Telford, and Telford is doing all their things because they were prepared to do it cheaper than Shire Services. How they do it, I don't know. And another one is out to a private company who is doing it. They managed to do it because of their school numbers. The smaller school numbers, and we live in a large rural county, and it's the transportation from a donor kitchen to the recipient kitchen, getting it there, and that may not be possible. And it's how do we maintain that viability?
Yeah,
So
Jane, yeah.
just very quick, just remind everybody we're in a public session here, so just need to be careful about talking about any particular contracts or any particular.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
Okay, right, Roger. So Vince I think Vince has said what he wants to say. So Julia, you want to say something?
Yeah, I've got two questions really. So this morning in Cabinet, we had a look at the Treasury report, and I raised my concerns around the bottom line savings in staffing budgets, 139,000 in children's and 127,000 in adults, which then you could track through, you could argue lead to some higher costs further down because we didn't intervene early. And we talked about the cost of employing agency staff to fill gaps where we haven't recruited. We had a robust debate this morning, didn't we, Willem, about that and about who was speaking to who. And really, so my point is that £1.5 million overspend in one department for agency spend is too much, because it was for 39 full-time equivalent staff, and that seems excessive. The response that I got is that is a nationwide problem and that is normal. And my question, I asked it then, but it was rebutted robustly, and I ask it again now in the hope that we can explore it. My question is, can we get some comparable statistics, please, from our council and other authorities to understand the ratio of direct employees to agency staff, so that we can collectively understand basic statistics, and we can perhaps all agree whether there's a particular problem in rural Shropshire or not. Perhaps Herefordshire have the same ratio as us, and urban Telford is more like Wolverhampton. But I'd like to see the numbers, and then we can just have an objective discussion around how isolated or not the problems of recruitment are in these departments. Because, and Benjay will confirm, our group are looking at alternative proposals around, just as I said this morning, around front loading, better terms, conditions and pay for these particular staff. And I know that all of us are looking at the same problem, I know we are, but one thing that could feed into that is what we've done with the adoption agency, which is where you have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding or similar, across neighbouring authorities, that we all agree the same salary, so that what we're not doing is undercutting each other, having this migration across borders and in and out of agency. So, there's method in my madness, but we need to start, if you don't mind, and Pat, you've already done the work and I've not seen it. I think it would be helpful to see the ratios, direct staff to agency from our authority, and compare it with others. I do have another question, but it's on a different topic. So would you like me to pause for break?
So yes. So when you went out, I
put to the ladies.
Yes, for a break. I did just say that we do need to improve our performance data. There's absolutely no doubt about that, because information like that is really, really important. And I agree with you entirely. We need to work with all other authorities so it's not a bum fight, but you need to understand what the situation is in other authorities. Because I sincerely believe from the work I've done with various people that actually we're in the same position as other authorities, but we need the data that sits behind that. And that data should be available to us and should be updated fairly regularly. And I've asked for some of that data for the task and finish group for adults for next week. Benjay, have you got anything else you'd like to add to that?
I'm quite happy to pick that one up, Chair. Thank you. Just very briefly, I think that the suggestion around looking at the ratio of permanent staff to agency, I think in principle, I think that's a great suggestion, and I can see the benefit of picking that one up. I will quite happily take that away and see what can be done around that. The caveat I would necessarily would need to bring to the committee's attention be that I am conscious of just how much data we currently have around different aspects of social care, and that actually trying to get that kind of data, particularly from other authorities, there may be ways in which we're able to extract it from some of the national data, and I'll see what we can do around that, because that would certainly be easier. But to go out on a particular trawl for the data, that's quite tricky, particularly at the current time. But as I say, I think there's merit in the suggestion. I will take it away and see absolutely what we can do with it. I think, again, in terms of the performance data, there is a lot of data at hand, and I'm looking forward to Monday's opportunity to bring a lot of that to life as much as we can. I think there is a lot of data which is being used. I think the difficulty sometimes is that the operational data which is necessary and needed to meet with some of the statutory obligations, particularly around things like safeguarding, and that takes us off in one direction. And there is other data which we also need, which is around things like kind of average costs to unit costs, and things like the relative level of spend on things like agency staffing. That is an issue. I think probably the thing I would point to, and I know there's some work happening on this at the moment, two things I'd point to. Tanya Miles, as exec director for this area, has recently commissioned some work on comparative costs around children's, which did basically set out, I think, in many ways in the way that you reflect, Chair, which is that we recognise that actually there's a fairly consistent level of performance and costs around different areas. There is a further report coming through in a similar mode. I think that's through ADAS, but I think there's some LGA support again for that. And I think perhaps those two documents which are coming forward in due course, those will provide some of the information that we're looking for. And perhaps they can come back to committee in due course.
I think the frustration for me, and probably Julia as well, is you can order all these things, but the data's out of date by the time it gets to us. And we, in fairness, we do a lot of work with our statistical, whatever you call it, Cornwall and all the rest of the thing. And I think there should be something in place, and this is another one of the conversations I'm going to be having, is we've got these statistical people there. We should be asking them and seeing what their data performance is like, and actually saying, okay, boys and girls, we need to do these particular things, and we need to compare them all so that we've got a better idea of what's going on. We need to be able to understand. And I think part of the reason why people get frustrated, and there's so much arguing about that, is because people don't understand and they want a definitive answer, and I don't blame them, because it's really, really important. So I think, there is more work to do, and with our statistical neighbours, because, as I say, moving forward, as times get harder and harder, the importance of all this information cannot be underestimated. And it'll allay some of the arguments, and, because we are where we are if we see the facts. And the facts don't lie, they're there in front of us. So that's all I've got to say on that. So probably that's probably covered that.
Question,
second question. Gwynam, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just, if I could just comment on that question from Julia, because it is a wicked problem that there seems to be an awful lot of competition between local authorities for the best qualified staff. And I know she mentioned this morning that we weren't perhaps paying enough on some people. From my time of working on WME, they recognise this problem within the West Midlands or completely, but also it's not as simple as comparing our authority to other authorities, because each authority doesn't have the same pay scales or the same way of working out their pay scales. And one of the things that WME are looking at is actually rationalising how all the pay is looked across the whole of the West Midlands, and that therefore it would bring it far more in line. So it is a wicked problem, but I would very much be keen to see the data myself.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Thank you, Gwynam.
So if I could just raise my second point, and it's regarding everyone's favourite topic, which is the Shrewsbury Shopping Centre. So in Annex 1B on page 6, we've presented with, if I've understood it, it's a net loss of 53,000 income predicted at the year end. And the explanation for it is due to adverse trading conditions in the retail sector, which have worsened by the recent national economic changes, inflation, increased utilities costs. I don't think anybody here would dispute that cost of living crisis, inflation and so on has put a squeeze on the retail sector. What worries me is the second bit, and I'd love to know where this crystal ball has come from, because the second paragraph says, advice from the management is blah, 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 blah. It's expected by the council that overall market conditions will improve over the next 12 to 24 months, with a resulting improvement in the trading position of the centre. Everything I have read and heard everywhere tells me that we've got a recession coming in the next 12 to 24 months. So I'd like to know, where is the advice coming from that Shrewsbury will be the only place in the country that defies the recession and is going to have improved conditions between 12 to 24 months with a resulting improvement in the trading position of the centre? I'd like to know where that advice has come from, because I think we've got to be realistic in terms of profiling next year and being quite realistic that spend is going to be down because of cost of living, and we shouldn't be banking on this income increasing within 12 months' time.
Do you want me to pick up, Chair?
Yep, go on then, James.
Okay, so firstly, just to confirm, there is a £53,000 variance against the income. It's still delivering £181,000 worth of income, so it's still.
Variance down.
Sorry, it's variance down. That's right.
Income.
Based on the budget, but the net position is it's bringing in £181,000 above its costs. So that's the position. It's just the budget was at 235. The advice that we get is from the agents that are working with us at the shopping centre. So the approach that we've taken has been to get the trading space filled. That means that they need to be, I think as it says, commercial concessions to enable those to be brought in. So what we are expecting is my understanding of the advice was that we're seeing a number of organisations, a number of businesses that are going out of business. That's slowed down, and so the level of occupancy within the shopping centre, we're expecting to maintain at these levels. We're expecting to keep it at a 98% or even better level of occupancy, and with those commercial concessions winding out over the next few years, we will be expecting income to increase on that basis. So the trading conditions for the individual businesses may vary, recession, non-recession, upturn in the economic forecast, all of those things may occur based on the makeup of the properties, the businesses that are within the shopping centre and those of the waiting list that could come in. So that's the advice that we've been given.
I just want to be absolutely sure I've understood. At the moment, we've given concession, we've given reduced rent to businesses because of the adverse conditions. And over time, that's going to get them in to get the 98% occupancy. So we filled the place with people paying lower rents than the full market rate, but they will taper out because that was just a sort of a welcome package. So the reduction on the rent will taper out in the next 12 months when we're expected to go into recession. And while those two things happen, so while our rent will increase, the energy bills will increase, council tax or business rate will increase, all their other bills will increase by 10% inflation, and they will face a recession. All of those factors in the next 12 months, we expect to generate more income and that those businesses will stay. Have I understood that that's our plan of what's going to happen in our shopping centre in the next year?
If I may share, your summary focused on lots and lots of negatives within that, and
economic picture
which are not incorrect. I'm not suggesting they're not, but there are a number of positives within that. Some of the positives are that, while not quite in the position that you suggested, but Shrewsbury has actually held up and is demonstrated to have held up much better than most town centres over a number of years. So there is an element to Shrewsbury actually is different to some degree. We also have, there were 3 shopping centres that are being consolidated down into one, and there's lots and lots of independence within that. So that there are lots of positive reasons as to why some of those negatives will be offset. I'm not in any way suggesting those negatives are not there. I'm saying that there's other elements to this. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding. This is just a sentence, and it's believed at this point in time. Now, in 6 months' time, that sentence may change, given the circumstances that are there at the moment. But based on our understanding at the moment,
yes, we expect it to improve.
Okay, can I just welcome the enthusiasm, and I like the optimism, but can I also ask, what is the plan B?
Hold on, I've got quite a lot of people wanting, the order I've got is David Vasmer. Did you have your hand up?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I've got David Vasmer, Roger Evans, and then Chris Schofield in my list.
It was on this point.
Well, let Julia finish, and then I'll just give you a little bit.
Notwithstanding the welcome optimism, what's the plan B,
Okay.
just in case recession does hit us?
So to confirm, in relation to the plan B, that's suggesting that's a plan A. Plan A would be a suggestion that we've automatically assumed that there will be increases in the budget. That's not necessarily the case. So it may well be that as we work through this, if market conditions improve, if income improves, we will then increase the budget on that basis. So plan A, if plan A was, we've now assumed this income's going to double, then we need a plan B. But plan A at the moment is that we've got an income target. We're not looking to increase that substantially. So therefore, there is no need for a plan B because it's already taken.
So you just adjust the income target according to the condition?
Yeah.
Right, okay, Roger, you wanted to say something connected to this.
If I can, Chairman, I've also picked up the words that Councillor Buckley came in, and that the first part of the paragraph, shopping centres management agent, is the overall financial thing. And then later on, it says the councils, two different sorts. There's the professionals saying something, and then the council. I also picked up this morning when it said the money there is from the cost of the Darwin Centre. There was £52 million spent on that for an investment or whatever. And I also note on the following page, the Shropshire Local Initiative is projected to incur unbudgeted extra costs of £126,000 from the centre located in the Darwin Shopping Centre. So for that centre, we're not getting it free. We're paying £126,000 more than budgeted, and the Darwin Centre is giving a small surplus, giving with the left and taking with the right, or
Right.
whatever. I'm not sure, Chairman.
Let
But
James explain.
there is no,
Okay.
there's no return mentioned in that on the capital employed. So if one takes that capital employed and look at a 1%, 2%, 3% return, the shopping centres are costing us money. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, there is a surplus from what James said, but I'll let him answer the
So
question.
just to confirm, Shropshire Local is the services that we provide to help people get online, to be able to access services, etc. There's a number of those locations, including a mobile service. Yes, we occupy a small site within the Darwin Centre. It used to be a larger site, but for commercial reasons, that site, that unit was then provided to another occupier because it was financially advantageous to do that. The loss that's been shown against Shropshire Local is predominantly a staffing cost. It's nothing to do with the rent that's being paid into the Darwin Centre. So there's absolutely no left-hand, right-hand in relation to this. And that overspend within Shropshire Local is predominantly offset, or possibly more than offset, by the fact that staffing from the customer service centre is being used to do that. So you have an underspend on the customer service centre, and you have an overspend on Shropshire Local because of the way in which we're managing that overall approach. It's nothing to do with the occupation of the unit within the Darwin Centre, or that loss is in any way funding that income. That's not the case. Sorry,
One last comment, Chairman, is that there is still no return on the capital employed. And if one takes that into consideration, whether it's an investment or not, there's £53 million being put into that place with zero return from it, I'm assuming. And so it was mentioned this morning that there's a small improvement on the cost of the Darwin Centre. We're looking at energy and all the other business rates, and we're making a very small profit on that, I assume, from what was said. But the capital employed, we're getting no return on it.
So again, if I may, Chair, the commercial element of the shopping centres is delivering £181,000 return, and the capital employed, the calculation that's undertaken on that
At the moment, statutory override in relation to that would only become an actual cost of capital should we decide to sell the shopping centre, Darwin, which we're not looking to do. So as it stands at the moment, we are making a return on the capital, and we have each year since the shopping centres were purchased. There are lots and lots of assets that we hold for non-commercial purposes, which don't make a return at all. It's the way the local authorities work. So the capital employed and the cost on those, every single swimming pool, for example, that we've built would have a huge negative cost of capital applied to it. It's, as a local authority, we're allowed to do that.
Okay, right. So we've got two more people who've been waiting patiently. I'm going to split it up a bit and we'll take Chris next. If
One quick question to James, really.
Yeah.
Do you still do work with the Business Improvement District at Shrewsbury? Because they have the fingers on the button of business and everything, how things are going.
Yeah, we do work with them, yes.
So they would give a more positive and some comments in the room.
If they were here, I'm sure they would give a much more positive feedback. But yeah, we do.
Yeah, and I think actually the centre manager, Kevin Lockwood, he's won a prize locally.
He did.
And they've got very high footfall. I mean, the figures, if you look at the figures, and they've got proper football cameras, they're very high. So I think Shrewsbury is doing quite well. Yeah. Okay, David Fassmer, ask you a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, I just firstly, I think it's a shame that we're discussing it now after Cabinet. It would have seemed more sensible to have had this discussion before Cabinet. I know there's all to do with time and everything else, but it'd be nice, really, wouldn't it, to have a discussion here where we can go into more detail. And then have a report to Cabinet saying, well, these are the issues which concern performance management. It would seem that would be a sensible way of the Scrutiny Committee operating. But
can I just stop you there? I have to say, and Willem will agree with me, not that long ago, we were looking at it 3 months after the event, I think. So we've tried to, and Roger will say, so we've tried to move it closer and closer, and we're getting there. And the idea is that we will do it first, but you've just got to give us the time to do that's right, isn't it, Willem? Yeah, so
Another 10 years.
Yeah. No, actually, I mean, it's like 12 months, we're on the same day, so that's pretty close. So the idea is, and in fairness to Gwilym, he's worked really hard on helping getting these green papers to us so that we can help to shape policy, which I really appreciate. So hopefully next time we will get it, hopefully the week before, but we're getting there. We are getting there.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort, and I do appreciate Gwilym's approach to it, because I do think it's much improved than what it was in the past, to be honest with you. So I appreciate Gwilym, and thank you, and hopefully we'll get there at some point. But the other thing I just wanted to concentrate on really was page 29, which of the report, which is first page of the appendix 6, which is looking at reserves. And this first thing, I think the last column, if you look at the bottom of the page, the section there, table there, the middle column doesn't add up. In actual fact, it should be 39,744.40. I think if you look at that, but just for correct just for accuracy points. But my concern is the actual fact that the council's like a train, really, which is approaching the fundamental bankruptcy, basically, because we are eating into our reserves. You'll see here that we're eating into our general fund reserves, and the whole of general fund reserves could be wiped out this year. We're also eating into our earmarked reserves, and we cannot continue to do that long term. And my concern is, in the past, I think what's tended to happen is at the last minute we have things like stopping all recruitment, for example, or we have something of cutting out any spending whatsoever in order to achieve the savings by the end of the year. And surely we should be thinking much more long term and trying to actually kind of organise the council's finances and make some changes which will actually help us get closer to the spending that we can afford. And it's like if we were a commercial organisation, we'd be having meetings kind of actually every week, kind of analysing what's going on, what's happening, where can we, what sort of schemes are coming forward to make savings, because I think a lot of the savings we're not achieving historically. If you look over time, we just don't make the savings which are often identified in the budgets. So my plea is, and I don't know what Task and Finishes Group's doing on this, and there might well be that I'm not aware of things that are happening, but that we should be, we as a committee should be much more on top of this, because we're, as I say, we're eating into our reserves, and if the government doesn't change its policies, which it seems to me is highly unlikely, we are going to continue to have this sort of funding arrangement we've got at the moment. We are going to face some very serious consequences, not this year financial year maybe, but the next financial year. And that's what worries me. And that's why I think we ought to be taking this situation, which is in marked patient time, much more seriously, and, having some proper discussions about it.
Oh, yeah, you can do. Just getting so
it links to the answer I gave at Cabinet this morning. It's a valid point that's being raised, and that is exactly what we're trying to do. So if we go back to an example whereby you'd have a spending freeze at the end of the year, that approach is driven by the underlying solution not being provided, the underlying problem not being solved. And as part of that, reserves perhaps being played in earlier in the year. So if you have an overspending situation and then you throw in some reserves to try and reduce that level of overspend, and then the overspend still isn't coming down, then the management action has been put in place is not working, then you then have to take more drastic short-term measures to bring the cost down. What we've looked to do this year, because we are focused on the Shropshire plan, focused on trying to ensure that our resources are aligned to our outcomes, we've gone through the savings proposals, and we've looked at where those overspending areas are. And what we've looked to do is try and find more robust solutions to that align with where we want to go to into the future. So we saw a £9 million overspend at Q1 and £11 million overspend at Q2. So that automatically would send alarm bells ringing to say, well, the position is worsening. However, what's underneath that is actually it's a much more robust projection at Q2 and does impact on the inflationary pressures that were there at the start of the year that weren't flowing through in terms of some of the figures, for example. So what we're looking to do, what we have done, and what has brought the figure down to 11 million, because it actually went up in between times, was finding base budget permanent solutions to those issues. So the 11 million is now, rather than a projected overspend with management action to come, this is now our much more robust and stronger estimate as to where we think that will go based on what we're currently expecting to be done by the end of the year. That's not enough, and more needs to be done. And so we're now working through what alternative measures could be applied to that. And part of that is then looking forward into the 23-24 financial year, because things that we can bring forward and do now will impact on that. We reserve the right effectively within that, because we haven't thrown reserves in, that we reserve the right, therefore, to come back towards the end of the year, where if we do still have an underlying overspend, which I would expect to be below 11 million, we can then look at our earmarked reserves position and see whether we need to consider that to try and bring down the overspend, because as is pointed out on page 1 of the appendix 6, the general fund balance is reduced to an unsustainable level. So it swings and roundabouts in a sense, but what you'd effectively do is reduce your overspend so that you have more sustainability over your general fund balance going forward. The reason we do it towards the end of the year is because in February we assess a risk-based assessment of the general fund balance. Now we know that it's a difficult financial year coming up in 23-24. However, the general fund balance calculation is a risk assessment. It's based upon the robustness of that programme. So if we had a very, very robust savings delivery programme and we reduce a lot of the risks out of that, you could actually reduce that general fund balance down because on the basis risk assessment, that's what we expect to see. If there is more risk involved in the delivery, then you expect that to go up. So we can assess that position at the same time as assessing where we are in the current year and looking at our reserves level, and the whole thing will work through. But at the moment, the message is this is a much more robust estimate of our overspending position at this point in year, far more robust than it was this time last year or in the years previously.
Okay. Vince.
Well, only just to, I suppose, in a way, reiterate a point that I made a bit earlier. Some of us, and I'm sure Gwilym will remember this, have been here for a good number of years. I was a Scrutiny chair for 6 years, which gave me a place on this committee. And it's funny how things seem to go round in a circle, because I do remember a good number of years ago there was some significant debate in this committee as well as at Cabinet and in the Cabinet Chamber about the lack of need for reserves. Fortunately, we built some up, but if we hadn't had our reserves, then we would certainly be not in the position we are today.
Thank you. Good point, Vince. Right, so I think we.
Could I just make a comment, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course you can, Gwilym.
Yeah, taking on Councillor Vasma's point and other points that have been raised regarding reports, etc. We are, riding a storm at the moment with budgetary pressures, inflation, staffing crisis, and all sorts of other areas. We're trying our best to get towards what you want, the reports coming out earlier, and also to have the performance much more on a timely basis. But moving forward, I think when we see the cabinet reports that come out for December, what Councillor Vasma is saying, that report will look at putting Shropshire Council on an even keel once and for all. And then hopefully moving forward from that, as long as it's delivered, we should be in a much better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. Right, so I suggest we just note this report. Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so
Can I just ask, with your permission, if I'm allowed to slip away? My wife got a new knee.
Yes, you did
3 weeks ago, and I managed to escape the home this morning at 9 o'clock. I've not been back since, so I'm not sure if she's still upright or at the bottom of the stairs or somewhere else. I perhaps, if it's okay with you, I should go home and check.
Wishes.
Thank you.
And I hope you cook us something nice for her tea.
No, I always do.
Well done.
Only because I like good food.
Thanks, Vince. Right, item number 9, the financial strategy mid-year review. And again, Gwilym, do you want to say something at the beginning of this?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Again, this is the report I believe we brought to Cabinet at the beginning of this month, and it showed us exactly where we are to date and the position going forward, which is an ever-moving feast. Not to repeat myself, I think once we get the future budget report coming out to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time, that will reiterate and build on this report that you have in front of you. And I'll throw it open to questions and for the officers to respond. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gwilym. Well, I'm just looking at my word, we have given it a good go today. Right, have we got questions? Roger, you're bound to have a question of Roger. You never let me down, Roger.
I didn't want to let you down.
No.
I noted in the report, and I have been in conversations with various others about Tom. Target operating model proposals.
Yeah.
As a scrutiny committee, have no idea what they are, what they mean, where we're going. But apparently that is the way we are going to be managing the budget. I wonder if there's any comments that can be made on that, please.
I've heard Tom before, target operating model.
Yeah, target operating model.
Yeah. Do you want to explain that, James? Or
I'm quite happy to. Gwilym, did you want to come in, or you got your hand up? That's all. You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, Gwilym.
It was a legendary hand, sorry.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay.
I'm happy to come in, and then I'll hand over to Ben if that's okay.
The target operating model is part of the solution, not the solution, and it's the way that the council arranges itself in the most effective and efficient way to deliver the outcomes within the Shropshire plan. So very simply put, if we're trying to align our resources to our outcomes, then we identify what the outcomes are, we identify the best way of delivering those outcomes, and then we align the resources of the organisation around delivering those outcomes. As it stands at the moment, work has been done over the summer to try and identify what those target operating model proposals might be. And to date, there were, I think it was 60 to 70 proposals that have been put forward and identified in the first instance. More information will be worked through as part of those, but that level of detail that members will probably be looking for is not available at this point in time. Now, what that means going forward is that there will be a program management approach which will identify what the target operating model sub-project might be, working through the business case in relation to that. If that business case then is within existing arrangements or within existing policy, it's just about adjusting things, then that will be implemented. If there is an qualities issue or a decision that needs to be taken in terms of the key decisions, or there's a value that exceeds our key decision threshold, then that would come back to the usual process for those to be agreed further down the line. So it's not a case of a one bite of the cherry with this. Some things will be there and taken forward. Other elements will work their way through a process in the normal way before a decision is actually taken on that proposal.
Okay, so Roger wanted another question.
I see. Right, Chairman, build on that. In the paragraph here, it says the benefit of the TOM proposals have now been estimated as £35 million, and it's been calculated that potential benefits will arise in later which of which 25 million is cashable. Tomorrow is December the 1st. The Cabinet will be considering its financial strategy for 23-24 in 2 weeks' time, if my arithmetic is correct. And I presume this will be listed then or not. So if we're only estimating it now, how are we going to discuss or even consult on a budget, which by the sound of it is going to be estimated, calculated, or whichever? So is TOM nearing completion? Is it going to deliver the savings that are needed for next year to deliver a viable budget? Because I still don't know how that budget for next year is going to be viable when one looks at the amount of savings that were supposed to have been made this year, which were not saved, and obviously will run into next year as a cost as well. I do have great concerns, as I said this morning at the Cabinet meeting. But this TOM, okay, if it works, but you've only got a fortnight.
Would you like to answer that question, Gwyneth?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm confident that we will have a plan in place by the Cabinet meeting on the 14th that will actually specify the strategy of what we're using and some of the areas where we will be creating those savings. To a certain extent, I agree with you, Roger. I believe, we have had issues regarding the delivery of savings. A lot of that has been around outside forces beyond our control, but there has been some internal issues which we've tried to maintain. Taking up what Councillor Vasmar was saying previously, when we actually put our proposals forward and we actually agree the budget in the spring, this next 12 months will be crucial for the council. And it has got to be imperative that we actually deliver in the next 12 months. And we will be monitoring that far more closely than we actually do now. Thank you.
Okay, so Julia.
Yeah, it's the same topic really, to understand more about these TOM proposals as separate to the in-year budget savings, because we've previously had discussions about some savings proposals which also change operating models, such as digitising a library, for example? Would that come under an in-year budget saving, or would that come under a target operating model? Because we're changing the way we operate in order to make a long-term saving. So I suppose from our side, we need to understand, have we seen some of these TOMs before with another name, or is it something completely fresh we know nothing about? And in either case, it's time we knew a lot more about them. And I'd like to make a request that we have a briefing on the backbenchers meeting, which will come up in a couple of weeks' time, to help all members understand what this might be. Because if you think for 1 minute that you're going to bring £35 million of savings to the meeting on the 14th of December for the first time and tell members how you're going to completely change the entire operating of the whole council, and that's the first time we hear about it, that's not going to be a very smooth ride. Whereas if you'd like to explain to us what a TOM is and how it works and whether we've seen or heard them before, it'll help us all travel this journey alongside you, won't it?
As far as I'm aware, we're following the Shropshire plan. That's our, you know, that's the whole thing. It's the Shropshire plan, isn't it? You know, we decide what we're going to do and we match what we're going to do to our resources. That's what I understand.
So are you saying that £35 million of saving called TOMs are different strands of the Shropshire plan? So it's the same thing with a new name. It's an aspect of something we've already seen, we're already familiar with. Is that correct?
There you go. I'm just conscious that this might start delving into the realm of politics, which is why I keep asking Gwyneth. I hope you don't mind, Gwyneth.
From my point of view, I think when we look at the TOM, and I will respect Julia's comments in some ways, that there will be parts of the TOM that will have no effect on us whatsoever, and there'll be internal things where savings can be made. But there may be other parts of the TOM which are not included in existing policy decisions, and where they are new policy decisions, they definitely have to come back for debate.
Okay.
So the new policy position that wasn't in the Shropshire plan?
No, they will be. They will again. The Shropshire plan. The money will lead the priorities as per the Shropshire plan, but the policy decisions on how that is delivered may need to come back for further debate.
Benja, you've got your hand up. Do you want to just try and make that bit clearer?
I'm not sure there's an awful lot I can add to what William was saying just then, but I think that there's something which I would perhaps suggest to councillors to be just a little bit cautious of. The proposals coming forward, I think what William's saying and what I'm wanting to say, probably similar to things that James has also been saying, is that we're not suggesting that there's a huge number of completely new ideas that are about to come forward. But it's clear from the paper that we need to come forward with £35 million worth of savings for the coming year, because that's what we need in order to balance the budget, and that's what we're obliged to do. We've also heard from the digital strategy green paper early on in this meeting that digital continues to evolve. We know this. I think the situation for the council is that we can't and we don't want to be in a situation where we just keep cutting back on the same old operating model. What we need to do is to work out how we can benefit from new innovations to do more with less, basically. I think one of the councillors noted earlier that it's highly unlikely that we're suddenly going to get a whole load more money, certainly for next year. So I think that what we're trying to work through is quite a significant challenge, but what we're trying to do is find ways of doing more with less to have a sustainable budgetary position. There will be further detail coming forward, exactly as William says. I think a lot of it will be very much around how we can leverage different technologies, different approaches, learning from peers, all sorts of different things, so that basically we do the same sorts of things as we're doing at the moment in a slightly different way. But there will be some things as well where there's a bigger, more substantial change, as Gwilym was alluding to, and that's where decisions will come back as is appropriate, to come back to councillors for scrutiny, for full decision, and so on. So those decisions will be coming forward, and we're working very hard at that at the moment.
Could I just ask for clarity? Whether just a quick clarity.
Just clarity.
Just to make sure I've understood. So could we say that digital first and the library digitisation strategy policy, that they are two examples of a Tom. Have we understood?
I'm not sure whether they're specifically included as Tom projects. I think they're examples of where we might be seeing some efficiency changes and those types of things coming through. There will be other proposals very much more in the vein, as Gwilym indicated, where it's more of a policy change. So we're actually looking at a more fundamental change to the way in which we're operating. But the business of local government doesn't change a huge amount from year to year. So we will be seeking to do very much the same things as we've been doing this year in next year, although some of those things might be delivered in a different way.
Okay, so Roger, because I am very aware of time, so if you ask me a question, Julie just wants one quick one, and then
A fairly quick one, and it's on the Tom, and it's the last sentence of the paragraph I referred to before. At this scale, benefits will significantly address the current budget challenge, but will need time and one-off resources to be put in place. Concerned to deliver 35 million, but we're saying that we've got to put extra resources in to actually deliver it. So is that 35 million plus the cost of the extra resources or not? I'm not sure, because it's a little bit, it isn't very definite in what it actually says, that paragraph. I'm hesitating about using some of the words because it is done in good faith, I recognise that, but the detail isn't there, and we're only a fortnight away. Thank you, Chairman.
okay. Well, I can absolutely assure you I have complete confidence in Gwilym because he's very smart. So I'm sure he'll have all the answers. Do you want to say anything, Gwilym?
No pressure there then.
No, absolutely. Have you got that wand?
Yes, absolutely. I'll go down to Argos and order one.
Right. Okay, so who do you want to answer that question? James, do you want to answer that question? Go on, then.
So this goes back to the thing I was talking about earlier around the robustness of the review that we're undertaking at the moment. So what do we need in terms of those one-off resources? We don't have a number around that. We don't have a definitive number around that. What we know is that there needs to be one-off resources to take this forward. What we also know is, yes, we do need time. That time may be a few weeks, that time may be a few years. So it's about working through that plan. Going back to Julia Buckley's point earlier on, and linking it to that, there are a series of, there's brought forward proposals that already exist. There are existing proposals that have been brought in during this year. There are target operating model proposals that have been identified, and there are other proposals on top of that. All of those, which unfortunately gets very complicated, all of those we have, and Ben and his team are making sure that we have full visibility on those to make sure that there is no duplication, that the way in which they're identified is very clear. It's not very clear to you guys at the moment because you don't have the visibility on it. And so what we're looking to do is to tidy all of that up as the first part of this, so that at least it's clear what the proposals are going to be. What you will end up with is a series of proposals, some of which we can just get on with them, and they look fine. They're not going to be particularly devastating or concerning. Others will be quite simple, but there may be more concern from a political debate. Others will be more complicated. Others will be complicated and take quite a long time to bring in. Against all of those, we'll be producing a programme, budget plans, business cases to ensure that we understand what they will be. And as part of those business cases, there will be an identification of the one-off investment costs, which won't be needed in all cases, but in some cases may be required to implement those. The assumption that we've made is that 35 million is net of that investment. So it's not about 35 million less the cost of investment. That would be a separate cost on top. And the funding of that, you've seen the reserves position. Some of those reserves, which will be used in the 23-24 financial year, are purposely the investment that we're holding back to enable us to cover this. And we'd also look at utilising the statutory instruments around transformation, which would enable us to use other resources that we have to cover the cost of the transformation. But only in those cases where we're talking about true transformative points. The focus on the target operating model is much more around those transformation areas that are quite considerable across the authority.
but they align absolutely to the Shropshire plan. So there are lots and lots of different ways in which you can deliver those outcomes within the Shropshire plan. If our existing policies allow them to be delivered, that's fine. There are efficiency savings. If, however, we change our policy approach to deliver those outcomes, then that would be policy change. That would be that would go through the usual council approvals process, which would include the cost of investment and the return on investment as part of it.
Right, I'm just going to, 2 more questions. Julia just wants a quick question and David just wants to ask a quick question, and then I think we've done pretty much, we've given it a good go today. Right.
My question is to Peggy and Chris. Did you know about these Toms?
I've heard Tom before, target operating mechanism.
And have you had a briefing? Did you know what it was in relation to the council?
I don't think that's an appropriate question to ask, to be honest.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because it's the first time we've heard about it, and I think that there might be a
Well, I
need.
think you've gone down the realms of politics again.
No.
I thought this was a performance scrutiny committee.
No, the opposite. I think that I'm
Yeah,
wondering
okay.
I'm
Okay,
wondering if we could have a briefing at the backbenchers committee. I wonder if that's where the gap
Oh,
in knowledge
It's
is.
not for me.
hold on a minute, Julia. James, the target operating model is from a briefing in Cabinet in when?
So this paper went to Cabinet in October.
Right,
So
okay, so
it's been
that's where it's
about
from.
around open for discussion since then. This is the first time that Scrutiny have met since then, but there's been lots of opportunity to ask questions around it.
So could we have a briefing to the backbenchers about it? If this is going to be coming in 2 weeks' time
Can do something.
to change the council's decisions around £35 million, I do think members need to get up to speed.
I mean, personally, I've got no issue with that. I think it's down to the chair of the backbenchers how that process works.
Is that Ted, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Might be a long meeting if you've got to go through everyone's budget though. Anyway, okay. So David.
Yeah, Chair, thanks very much. And just along with Tom's, there's also reference in this page 29 to the peer review group. And it says here that the report is going to be published shortly, and action plan for the council is responding to the report. I mean, it's a shame it couldn't be here today, to be honest with you. It would be nice if it could be here today. But I presume that you mentioned before, James, about the various elements you were considering in terms of managing the budget and making changes. Presumably the recommendations made by the peer review group will be part of that, and hopefully we'll be able to discuss any recommendations which come forward at the next performance management.
Is that, can I just ask, is that the scrutiny one you're talking about?
It's the one
Financial.
it's a financial peer review. So on page 29, it's internal reviews and
Because we've had quite a few.
Yeah,
We've gone through the other day about the children and adult services. Okay.
Chair, can I just say a word? Just to let Scrutiny be aware that a lot of our proposals coming forward to Cabinet will be on the backing of the peer review.
Okay,
Just-
when's the
just so
peer
you're
review
aware.
coming out?
I believe the initial report should be actually out already, isn't it, James? It's
Yeah.
actually it's been on the members' pages on the intranet for some time now.
Okay, Roger?
Yeah,
Have you not
It's
seen it?
been there, but not how it is going to be adopted or anything like this. That has never been followed up. I thought.
Yeah, but with respect, Roger, the way we're going to back that up will be in our mid-term financial strategy with what we're going to bring to Cabinet on the 14th of December.
So if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
So the peer review took place in June. An action plan has been pulled together by Ben and myself. That action plan is working its way through the process. To be honest with you, if we hadn't had to focus so much on the budget process for the last month or so, then that action plan would have been published. I'm just checking in my mind now whether we actually have published it. I know it's very close to being published over a month ago. If it's not, then it's there, it's ready. We can publish that. There is a follow-up peer review which is being agreed for March time. So that will be where the peer reviews come back and review our action plan on that basis.
Through you, Chairman.
Okay.
Ask that the action plan be published tomorrow, if it is available. It hasn't been made available yet. The
That's fine.
peer review has, but the follow-up action plan has not.
Okay.
Whether we do it tomorrow or not, I don't know. I'm not going to make promises, but we will. We'll review it and we'll make sure it's published as soon as possible. Thank you,
Yeah,
Chair.
so we'll get that done. Right. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your forbearance. We're going to, is everyone happy? We just note the review.
Chairman, I see there's no programme on the agenda for
No,
today.
well, partly because in fairness, poor Daniel's ill.
Yeah, okay. But,
So you know, we have got a programme and we can, you know, he's not very well, so we will sort that, Roger. There's no, you know, and he's only just been taken ill, bless him. So get well soon, Daniel. Okay, so on that note, I think I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, sorry, Gwynn, thank you so much for coming.
No worries. Yeah, it's been very useful. Thank you.
It's all right. You were very good. Well done. It's a long one.